Have you ever Googled your name? If you have, you were probably shocked to see some of your personal information floating around for the whole world to see. Every once in a while, I Google myself just for fun. I'm always surprised what kind of things are floating around the internet. It's just creepy that these companies have this information on me. So this is what they do. These data brokers are making money hand over fist by selling your info to robocallers, spammers, and in some cases, much worse. This is why I'm talking about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura can identify data brokers who are exposing your information and then submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Brokers are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do that. So let Aura handle all of it for you. Now you can get off of all of those lists. You can try Aura free for 2 weeks using my link here below, aura.com/Craig. Aura does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you can't even see. It's really easy to set up, so you don't have to bother downloading several different apps just to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft, insurance, and even more. You get everything at one affordable price. So let Aura do all the hard work of keeping you safe online so you can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. So if you saw the movie Rush from 2013, you will know this family. The movie Rush covered the rivalry of two top names in racing, Niki Lauda and James Hunt. The years-long rivalry came to a climax in the 1976 Formula One Championship. I won't tell you who won the championship, but his son is now following in his father's footsteps. Meet Freddie Hunt. Hey, Freddie, how are you this morning? Or this afternoon where you are?
Yeah, evening where I am. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah. Where are you in this part of this world this day?
I'm in Scotland. I'm at home on my farm.
You're on a farm? I hope there's a go-kart track where you can practice.
Unfortunately not, no. Got a quad bike, but that's all.
Okay, that's good. So, no, I'm a fan of your family. You know, I'm a fan of Formula One, and it was a great pleasure to come in contact with you recently. And I'm sure you have some amazing stories. For those who don't know, why don't you walk these people through the background and so forth?
Okay, so I guess we'll start with my father. For anyone that doesn't know sort of who I am or who he was James Hunt's the 1976 Formula One World Champion. He won the title with McLaren. He started in Formula One with Team Hesketh, which created quite a lot of noise due to their sort of flamboyancy. And 1976 was a very dramatic season, which captured the imagination of several film producers who then made the movie Rush in 2013 out of the season. Dad then retired in 79 and I came along in 87. And unfortunately, my father died when I was 5 from a heart attack. So that was that. And motor racing was never on the scene. And until the age of, I think I was 18, I was randomly introduced to motorsport just by sheer chance and was offered to drive a racing car at an event. And I did, and I loved it and decided to go racing. So that's sort of everything in short.
That's quite late for a race. I mean, my understanding of the career trajectory usually is for these young people, if like you were 13 years old, you've been karting already and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. No, I didn't. I wasn't exposed to any of that. I mean, Uncle Dave, my father's little brother who raced, he occasionally suggested and mentioned we should do some karting, but I didn't realize why, because Dad was so young when I died. Yeah, I knew he was he was a world famous racing driver, but I didn't really put 2 and 2 together, and I didn't know how famous he was or how powerful the name was within the sport. So I just carried on with my life as, we weren't particularly close to my uncle. I'd probably see him twice a year sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up on the back of a horse because my mother was from a horse background. Her parents were both racehorse trainers. So she was horse nuts. I grew up on the back of a horse and never really considered anything else until, well, it's funny, the day that actually when I was 18, ran out of money and decided to sell what was left of the horses before they were too old and knackered and worth nothing, try and get a job playing for another team. And then that same day I was invited to the Goodwood Festival of Speed and my life completely changed in the space of 48 hours.
Good grief. Tumultuous upbringing. How things would have been different had your father survived another 10 years, you would be 15 years old, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's quite funny. My brother actually had a picture of a T-shirt when he was, when my father was still alive, saying "in training for the British Grand Prix 2013."
Oh,
So about it, maybe he did have intentions for us to race. So I think because of safety, I think he actively discouraged his little brother from racing because it was still so dangerous then. But
oh yeah, we saw everybody saw that movie,
yeah,
Rush.
I mean, it was extremely dangerous. They were losing average of over one driver per season just in Formula One, let alone all the other categories. So, it was extremely dangerous motorsport in those days, very little protection and, big, very penetrable fuel tanks.
Racetracks had issues,
Oh, yes, little runoff, certainly probably never has as many air ambulances and things like that. So yeah, your chances of death were much, much higher. But nowadays, with invention of carbon fiber and the utilization of that in racing cars, it's become very much safer than a lot of other sports these days. I mean, downhill biking, even polo, equine sports, I would say, probably even rugby are more statistically dangerous than motorsport.
Isle of Man motorcycle racing.
That's a slightly different cup of tea. It's
Yeah,
different ball.
yeah, those guys are nuts. Don't they have like one fatality every race, more or less?
I think this year they only had one or two. Last year they had six. I think their average is 2 point something per year, or 3 point something per year.
These people are a special breed. God bless them.
Oh, there they are. Well, it's funny. I was chatting to some of the guys who race in the TT. They said, "Oh no, we're not the nutters. It's the sidecar guys that are the nutters."
Because they're just trying to justify what they do to their spouses or girlfriends. It's not that dangerous. There's other dangerous sports. Space shuttle pilots, submarine drivers.
Yeah.
Anyway, but now I read your history. You went through polo and you were actually a pretty good polo player. You were down in Argentina. You had a fleet of horses, about 6 horses, which I understand is basically the minimum.
Pretty much, yeah. You can do it off 4 or 5, but if one goes lame and, so it's at the level I was playing, you play 4 chukkers, so 4 quarters to a match, 7.5 minutes each quarter. So you need a minimum of 4 for one match, but you need backups and reserves, when someone go lame. And even if none go lame 4 throughout the whole season, they're completely knackered by the end of the season. So yeah, you need 6 minimum, ideally, preferably more. And my horses weren't good enough for the level I was now playing at. And then, so that was another reason. Yeah, I was moving up. My horses, I think total, were worth $9,000 when we sold them all. And one horse of the level I needed would be looking at 20 to 25 grand. So we needed, £100,000+ to buy a new string of horses, which would have been up to my level of play, which we certainly didn't have. And that's why on, a very solemn conversation with my mother on a Friday afternoon, we decided that we'll have to sell what's left of them, take the $9,000 and put that aside and try and get a job playing for another team. And just that evening, I went into town to rent a movie before the days of Netflix, and bumped into a friend who said, "Come to the Goodwood Festival Speed tomorrow." And that's when I was introduced to motorsport. I hadn't been to a track since my father died, however many years ago before that was.
All of a sudden you said, well, maybe this might be an alternative, right?
Yeah, well, I was encouraged by the chap who invited me. He was an ex-racing driver turned polo player. Argentine fellow, a good friend, and he said, "Look, Fred, you're not a bad player, but you've got no money and no horses and no farm to breed the horses, so it's hopeless. But with your name, if you're reasonably good at motorsport and you like it, you should be able to make a career out of it." So with that, and then the next day I bumped into the Polo England captain, and he said, "Look, Fred, I'm number 1 in the country, and I'll be lucky if I take home 20 grand at profit at the end of the season, and I've got a farm to breed the horses. So, I advise you get out now before you end up completely broke like me."
A dream killer, really, right?
Well, for polo, yes, but things happen for a reason, and fate seems to step in. And also at that time, I was so naive, I didn't realize that I would have to find the money to fund it, and I certainly didn't know how much it cost. I assumed, great, James Hunt's son, I'll be a paid racing driver. This is brilliant. I mean, I didn't even know there was a difference between a road tire and a racing tire. That's how little I knew about the sport. So it came as quite an abrupt shock to me when I found out, okay, if your next season, your first season, you need to raise £105,000. Well, how am I going to do that? I don't know. And luckily, with the help of my uncle and a few negotiations and a couple of donations from friends, my father's friends, as sponsorship, we managed to get the first season paid for.
And so now, where are you in your career? So it's hard to get into Formula One. You have to go through the Formula Series, right? Formula 3, Formula 2. Is that the
Yeah.
path?
So that was initially the plan, was to do Formula 4, then move up to Formula 3, assuming we can find all the money to pay for this, and my performance is okay, and then up to maybe GP2 or Formula 2, and then into Formula 1. Unfortunately, I had a mental issue. In a nutshell, I couldn't deliver under pressure. So for the first 2 years, although I was quick in testing and quicker than I should have been for my experience, so it was pretty encouraging. There obviously was talent there. I couldn't seem to deliver in a race, and ended up with a lot of spinning and crashing. And even when I did finish the race, I'd be, I think P10 was my best finish, or P8 or something like that. So even though some of my testing pace was top 6, top 3 speed, so I stopped racing in 2009, and then long story short, decided to come back in 2014. Since then, up until last year, I scraped together a little bit of few sponsors here and there for one-off races, a few invitation drives, but never really a full season until last year, which was the Michelin Le Mans Cup in an LMP3 car, and it's a highly competitive international championship. It was with a new team, Writer Engineering, these guys. Beginning of last season, we met and they offered me a 5-year contract with the shared dream of winning Le Mans by 2026. And they had the outfit to do it. They are an extremely good team, considering they had never raced with a prototype before. They're historically a GT team. They built Lamborghinis, all those race cars. They designed all of those. But they took on this LMP3 car, and with no pre-season testing, so the first race we were driving a shopping trolley. But anyway, we ended up coming second in the championship and winning the last race of the season. So that sort of really encouraged us that we certainly can do this.
Am I mistaken? I remember seeing in Rush, the movie, where your father went over to vomit at one race, right? He was getting nervous, and that's the way he just purged himself of that. You get that stomach thing, or maybe it was from leftovers of alcohol last night or whatever, or a combination of that kind of thing. But I remember he had a way to clear his mind, and of that, the reticence about doing this crazy stuff in those cars on those crazy tracks. And it was during a very dangerous time of racing, and that's the way he was doing it. So maybe that, and I'm just speculating here, that you take a little bit more after your father, both with your talent and with those challenges to get over that hurdle, to go fast, to really push the car to 10 tenths. But you seem to be over it now.
I seem to be over it now. I think our nerves spawn from different places. So his nerves, actually one slight inaccuracy in the movie, but actually by the time he got to Formula 1, he had controlled those nerves and he was no longer being sick before races. That started way back in the Formula 4 days, when obviously he was scared for his health, naturally. But B, if he had crashed the car, he had no way of continuing because he was already in debt. He had to take out a loan to buy that first Formula Ford car. So that's when it started. And then Formula 3, he was always driving with a gun to his head for the same sort of reasons, that if he crashed the car, it could be game over financially for the team.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure, yes. But he also had tremendous self-belief because he did deliver in the races. I think in Formula 3, he was normally either, if he didn't crash, he was winning them. So they did very well. My nerves came from putting pressure on myself that I have to deliver. I don't know if you've ever experienced playing sport. Let's say you play sport with a friend. I don't know what you play. If you play snooker or pool or squash or tennis, and you're playing quite relaxed. But as soon as you put some money on that, it gets a bit more serious and you tense up. There's a bit of pressure because it means something. If you can relate to that, that's the kind of pressures I feel for myself.
I do track days with my little R35 GTR, and if I've taken out the track insurance, I'm a little more ballsy because I know if I stuff it into a guardrail, I'm going to be made whole. But if I'm driving somebody else's car, because a lot of times people toss me the keys to go drive their car, and I do way slower than they do because it just respect for their car, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's a completely different thing. And if the car even steps out a little bit, I get that quick thing in my stomach, like, oh no,
Yep.
somebody's walking
Yep.
home and it's probably me.
Yeah.
But that's small potatoes, really, really.
Well, still, I mean, yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, last year, I knew certainly for most of the season, if I crashed the car, we did have budget to repair it, so there was less pressure. However, later on in the season, and then particularly this year, the last race I did last weekend, I know that the finances are tightening. So if I crash the car, that would take more money out of our future race budget and test budget. So I was being very, very careful not to damage the car. And I was on a new circuit. I was at Zandvoort. Obviously, I wanted to do very well there because that's where Dad won his first Grand Prix. However, it's a very high risk circuit. If you go off, chances it's going to be at high speed and you're going to be in a wall. So and these crashes are very expensive in these cars. So the pressure was on there. Luckily, the car was damaged, but no through any fault of my own, and the damage was minimal. So we were okay.
Yeah, it's scary when you have all these people relying on you. You know, your team has obligation to get sponsorships and so forth, and that's a big thing. And if you don't get the money in there,
Yeah.
you can't continue to race. And every crash, even if it's in practice, it's a lot of money. A lot of money.
I mean, we had in a test day earlier on in April, so this is just testing, we had a gearbox failure. Well, gearbox overheated, I think it was. Was it the gearbox or something? Yeah, it was gearbox. Overheated. Anyway, it cost 45,000 euros for that. Yeah. And that was without having a crash. So, things can happen just like that. And unfortunately, the gearbox and engine aren't insured. You can't. The insurance companies won't cover them.
At that point, you might as well spin it around and back it into a wall so they could be covered by insurance. The gearbox is going. I'm gonna make a U-turn here at the straight away.
Yeah, I didn't think quick enough.
I'm just trying to be creative. I know nothing about it, so I'm trying to be creative. But the competition is amazing. And I remember the old days. What got me into older Formula One racing is a video I saw many years ago. Who was it? Villeneuve against.
Are you talking about the battle they had at Dijon with the French driver?
The French
in the Renault. Yeah, that's the most probably legendary 3 laps in history of the sport.
The Ferrari.
Ferrari of Villeneuve against Arnoux racing for second place at Dijon. I
was ready to sell my house and go to start out a racing career at 32 years old. But I talked myself over the ledge because being a racing driver is like being a piano player. You can be trained to play the notes, but to make the music, you have to be born with something. And I think it's the same thing for being professional racers, the guys who can really drive at 10 tenths.
I would agree. Yes. I mean, there are some people, I've done a little bit of coaching for, novices, and some people, naturally can get around a track for their first go relatively quickly. Other people, several hours or several days practice in, they just still can't go that, nearly as fast as some of the guys can in the first hour. So,
but when I started to get to know you, I was fascinated that you were doing a driving coach at Nürburgring as a hobby, or as a job, or doing these ride and drive things. So I have met many race drivers who are big names, and they're doing like parking lot car introductions, like the new Cadillac CTS-V. I did that at Laguna Seca with some famous race car drivers. Really? This is what you're doing? He says, yeah, it pays well. They're paying these guys like $500 a day. And this is back 15 years ago.
I would certainly do that for the right price. However, the tracks in the UK, I think they pay £160 a day. And due to where I live, the travel it'd take me it'd be a 3-day round trip getting to a circuit, working 160 quid. And if I am looking for and open to taking up private clients, where it's one-on-one tuition, and I don't have to be a member of the circuit's instructors team, where you have to do a whole bunch of tests and courses and for all their health and safety and all their insurance. I can take private individuals to a track and teach them. That's
good. That's gonna be good stuff for you. Aren't you still friends with Nicky Lauda's son, Matthias, Matt?
Yes, I am. Yeah. He's a good man. However, he is pretty much I think he has pretty much fully retired from the sport now and focusing on his kids. And he's working as a commentator for the Austrian TV on the Formula One. So he's still involved in motorsport to an extent, but no longer driving.
Well, his career path was different. He was really into it for pretty much his whole life, right?
Yeah, I said he had a very successful start to his career, and that was back in the day when I think sponsorship was a little bit easier to get. His father obviously was alive, although Matthias said his father didn't help much at all. Occasionally he would, financially, but I'm sure he got advice, and he had his brother managing him, sponsor hunting for him, who I assume was very well connected and influential, and he managed to get him the funding which was required, which unfortunately I didn't have. I only had my uncle trying to find me sponsors at the beginning, and then after that I was on my own. And with no formal education, no knowledge of marketing or advertising like that, I really had no idea how to do it. Failed to find sponsors.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I was imagining that you have to be at all these different races to be kind of visible for the players, right?
Yep.
So that's a big expense. Just even if you're not racing, but I'm sure you do that while you are racing with rider engineering.
Yeah, traveling to events, races and various other events, motorsport events as well. Is great, but it is time consuming as well and expensive. If you can only invest so much, flights and travel costs and hotels, and time. So I do go to events, and most of or in fact, I think all of the sponsors that I have found in the past have come from meeting individuals face to face rather than picking up the phone and cold calling companies.
LMP, you guys are in LMP right now. They're doing LMP3 and they're moving into LMP2, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we did LMP3 last year. They were doing it again this year, with the intent to move up to LMP2 next year.
Those cars make about 650 horsepower, right? Something like that.
Might be 600 now, but they're at least 600, yes.
Okay, so those are my favorite cars. The LMPs have always been my favorite cars to watch at Le Mans. Always, because they were just so cool.
They are the coolest cars in my opinion. A Formula One car, they change so much, and I think the older Formula One cars are pretty up there in coolness. I love the 90s and the early 2000s ones, but now they're a bit just spaceshipy. But yeah, the Le Mans cars back from the 50s up until the modern day, all of the prototypes just look fantastic.
Gorgeous cars. Now, you said something about going to Le Mans in 2026. So what is the path to get there?
So, Writer Engineering and I, we've come up with a plan that obviously 2026 is the ambition to win Le Mans on or by that year. LMP2 in the European Le Mans series is probably, we think, is our best way of doing it. There are a few other ways, but we need to be in the top 3 in the championship in the points to get an invitation to Le Mans, or have won it the previous year in the LMP2 class, because LMP2 was, and it still is this year, but won't be next year, running in part of the World Endurance Championship. So if you're in the World Endurance Championship, you naturally get an invite. You are already at Le Mans because it's part of the championship. Le Mans is. But now LMP2 is being phased out of the World Endurance Championship because there's not enough space on the grid. It's now full of hypercars, or the LMDH cars, they call them, and the GTs. So there's no space for the LMP2s. However, Le Mans is a much bigger circuit. They can fit both of the hypercars, the GTs, and I think 10 or 12 LMP2 cars, which they were reserving a spot for the Le Mans 24-hour only. So our intention is to be in the top 3 in the European Le Mans series and get an invite to Le Mans.
Well, that would be a great title if you got it, because your dad won at Formula One. You win the championship there, and then if you win at Le Mans, there were only like two other racers that are that prestigious. Indianapolis 500, which I don't consider that as a prestigious as a Formula One event. Formula One championship or a Le Mans one.
No, I wouldn't. I would say, as individual races go, it must be Monaco Grand Prix and Le Mans. Those are the two top races. Yeah,
Monaco. Yeah.
It's a shame that the World Endurance Championship doesn't get as much excitement as coverage and viewers as Formula One, because although some of the races are very long, the shortest race is 6 hours. They're 6, 8, 12,
Yeah,
and
6 hours. Yeah,
24. So
6 hours.
it's a lot to watch. However, I think there's a lot more depth to the sport, and it's a lot more interesting.
But TV coverage is much better in Europe. Much better.
It is getting there, but it's just the following. It doesn't have the fan base like Formula One does, which is a shame, because it's more than a shame. It's a real bugger, because it costs money to run this, and it's the fan base that essentially generates the cash.
Right. You have to have the eyes on the races to see the sponsors. Right. Yeah, that's what you have to do. So this is a hell of a story. 2026, that would be 50 years after your father won the Formula One championship.
Yes.
Now,
exactly.
if you to win at Le Mans, that's a good story.
Well, I like to think so, yes. I mean, hopefully we can, and we will. I wonder, I haven't actually checked this out, but if any Formula One world champions' sons have won Le Mans. I know they've won Formula One world championships, the Villeneuves, the Rosbergs, but whether any Formula One world championship champions' sons have won Le Mans in the past, I'm not sure.
I looked at it. I couldn't find it, but I probably wasn't using the right search terms. However, but that's still an amazing story. If it has been done, it wasn't recently.
No, the great news is I think I'm really capable. So
but just this part of your journey this far, why aren't we doing a documentary? I think there's something here.
Well, it has actually crossed my mind, because not that I particularly want to have a documentary made about myself for any sort of personal egotistic reasons, but I have thought about the extra coverage it would generate for potential sponsors, because as I said earlier, it's very difficult to find sponsors for endurance racing because of the limited coverage. However, if one was to cover it by the documentary, it would increase the coverage tenfold or more, and therefore be more attractive to sponsors. So it's probably a very good idea.
And for awareness amongst the public. Not to mention,
indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and not to mention it would make great television.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully. I mean, if it's shot in the right way, I think I've got an interesting story already, even, win or fail, win or lose. I think I would love to show people actually how hard it is to get to Le Mans. Unless you are one of the superstar drivers and you are hired by a factory, that's one way. Or you have a load of money. Those are the only two ways you're guaranteed in. Without that, the way I'm doing it is the only other way. And I would love to show the world actually just how hard it is. And then just getting to Le Mans is one thing. Trying to win it is a whole other story altogether. You could be leading the race and have a mechanical failure. You could be taken out by someone through no fault of your own. There's 100 things that can go wrong in the space of 24 hours racing.
Even in Formula One, it's the same thing. A lot of things can happen in the race.
Indeed, yeah. And just in an hour and a half, the race can completely turn on its head, as you've seen.
So if you're somebody like Mick Schumacher, I would imagine, because his father, his winnings and his career is much more recent. Everybody still remembers the name right off the top of their head. They know there's Schumacher there. I mean, it's like Andretti. Same thing in NASCAR. If you're not married to a Petty or a son of a Petty, Richard Petty, those kind of guys, Dale Earnhardt's, right, all that kind of stuff. It's more difficult to make the break into it. But you're already in the space. What you're trying to do now is to fund the team that gets you to Le Mans. And that's not
exactly,
easy.
Yeah.
That's a big thing to do, because everybody takes a look at Formula One first, right? I think, and some subsidiary. But Le Mans skips over just the fact that you're racing in LM2 or LMP3. It's a prestigious event on its own.
Yeah, the amount it costs to run a Formula One team. So the amount of money the sponsors are putting in, I know they're getting a tremendous amount more exposure. But I think, the numbers we're looking for are probably well under 10% of what it costs to run a Formula One car. So I think, it is possible to find, to get these companies to part with their money. I mean, to be able to give a decent return. And that's even without a documentary. I do believe it is possible, but with a documentary, then hopefully it should be a no-brainer for investors.
Really, the story of how do you get to Le Mans is a big story.
Exactly, yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, provided, it would need to be picked up, by a well-known outlet such as Netflix or Amazon or Discovery, and that would then be able to reach a large audience, and therefore hopefully give a good return on investment.
Yeah, the exposure alone. I mean, it's all about eyeballs on the brand.
I mean, there has been a few motorsport documentaries made, but the recent most popular one was Drive to Survive, and I think that switched on a lot of people. But it's completely different to endurance racing. And I don't think there's been a sort of all-encompassing documentary of any endurance racing yet, of the quality and the depth of Drive to Survive. So I'd love to create something like on the lines of Drive to Survive, but obviously it's only following one driver, but it could be all the ins and outs of
Yeah,
what
but it would
takes to get
cover
there.
everybody else, because if you look at Drive to Survive, they started off with Daniel Ricciardi, right? Remember him?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was a character, and I really liked him. I really did. You know, he's going through a lot of similarities that you're going through, that mental cloud in the head, the self-doubt and all that kind of stuff, and then have to refocus, and he came back strong. But by that time, he was out of that other team, and moved into another team, which wasn't as competitive. And it really,
Yeah. That was a shame,
he had to
wasn't it?
take, yeah, it took a step back for his career. But to his credit, he's still there, and he still had that attitude. You know, he's got this high energy kind of thing. So something like that would be a lot of fun and cover lots of drivers, I guess, which would be the best way to do it. You know, you can't just talk about one person, but there's a whole
Yeah.
bunch
Yeah.
of
That's
characters in there, and there's all the competitors and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be a great thing to do. I
yeah.
hope it pans out. It would be good for the people in the classes and even people that are in that series. And it would be great for the fans, because I don't think a lot of people, especially in this country, don't really talk about Le Mans so much. I mean, a lot of my friends watch it, but it's not like dinner conversation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of other countries like that as well. I mean, in Europe and the UK, it's known about, but a lot of other countries. I've got a friend of mine in India, and he says if he mentions any other car which is not a Formula car, they just haven't got a clue what it is. So they know about what they know about Formula One and the Formula 3 and moving up to Formula One. But if you said to them LMP3 or GTLM, they wouldn't know what that was. It would be great if we could, make a documentary like that and get it really to a global audience. That really would be something.
And we're getting into a time in our lives where the electric cars are coming along, and these cars, these gasoline powered cars, are not going to be living on the track forever. They'll probably be in like vintage before we know it, right?
I hope not. I really hope
I
not. Because I mean, not just for the noise. I'm actually. I wouldn't describe myself as a petrol head. Funnily enough, obviously I enjoy racing. I enjoy fast cars. I enjoy the technology of it, and I don't have anything mechanically against electric cars. What I have against them is building them, what it takes to build them and power them. It's not feasible. It's not realistic. But the real solution, I believe, is e-fuels, which fuels which have a negative or a zero carbon footprint. So it removes carbon from the atmosphere in the manufacturing of these fuels, and then in our normal current ICEs, internal combustion engines, they can be burnt and they do emit CO2 and other emissions, but overall it's a neutral carbon output or footprint. So I think that is the way forward. We don't have to mess around changing all of our cars. I mean, mining tremendous, God knows how many millions of tons of cobalt, which we don't have a unlimited supply to. It's all under most of it's under the Congo, so we have to flatten the Congo to get to it. A lot of slavery involved. It's pretty a nasty thing. And then the disposal of them.
Right.
And also, even if everyone did have electric cars, we don't have enough power to charge them up.
Right.
So,
Same thing in America.
So we're still burning fossil fuels to charge up the batteries. I mean, I can't understand what.
In the British Isles, if all the islands sunk tomorrow, it would reduce the carbon emissions by 0.02%.
Yep.
So it's insignificant, but that's not to say we should stop trying.
Well,
right?
actually, I think we should stop trying, and I'll tell you exactly why. Because we've got far bigger problems on our hands. And actually, carbon dioxide is food, is oxygen for plants. So it's not actually such a bad thing, and we contribute far less of carbon dioxide as a human species in comparison to all the other natural occurring carbon dioxide emitters. It's a very small percentage. What we need to be focusing on is deforestation and wildlife and pollution. Those are what's going
Conservation,
to
absolutely agree.
that's what's going to kill us.
Yes.
And then once we got that under, if we can get that under control, all the illegal logging, all the illegal fishing, which is going to ruin the oceans. We're looking at an ecosystem collapse. Then we run out of food. Then we're all dead. It's very straightforward. And then if we get all that under control, then we can start thinking about our CO2 emissions. But it is not top of the list at the moment, in my opinion.
But for right now, people still want to live their lives, and I, for one, have great respect and fondness for motorsports. I always have since I was a little kid. The first toy I can remember was an RC slot car set, and my father was not into cars at all. Zero.
Like scale electric.
Yeah, you know, on the little slot tracks.
Yeah, and you got the controller and it whizzes around. Of course, we had one of those too. Yeah.
When my son was 8 years old, the Tamiya racetrack was a quarter mile from my house, so we got into RC cars. So we were building Supras and RX-7s and CLK GTRs. You know, RC cars. We had a great time. My son's in cars. I'm in cars. I've been doing it for 40 years. And so I just don't want, it's such a part of me. I can't imagine doing without it, because I respect the idea of electric vehicles to some extent. But for me, they're just toaster ovens. They're just appliances. And no soul.
No soul. That's a very good way of putting it. They are, they're dull. I think the acceleration of them is quite good fun, but that's about it.
Yeah.
that's all they've got to offer, really, performance-wise. They're heavier because of the batteries. But don't worry, even in worst case scenario, if the whole world went electric, there would still be collectible vintage cars, which we could still race, and I'm sure you could still even drive. Instead of banning them, if it came to that, just issue a license if someone's allowed a certain amount of gallons of fuel per month or per year, which they could still drive their nice cars recreationally. Yeah. And it would, not so just as long as we're not using them for transport every day.
My car runs on E85 100%. My little GTR converted to E85, which is $2 a gallon, which would be about a £1.60.
Oh, you're about the same as us then. Yeah, I think we're just about £1.40 at the moment. God, you're paying a lot. I thought that the States was cheaper. Or is that special fuel?
E85 is special fuel. It's straight 85.
Okay.
So it's $2.29 per gallon, and there's 3.6 liters to a gallon. So it's up £1.60 for each liter. So
right, yeah.
So we're definitely more expensive. I mean, you're definitely more expensive than we are. 1.60 pounds.
£1.60 per liter.
Per liter, times 3.
Yeah, times 3, 160. Okay, yeah. Well, no, I was saying I paid $1.45 the other day for diesel, and it was the same price as petrol. But it fluctuates a lot, and that's just standard diesel, and it's not the the better higher octane stuff.
Yeah, so things are kind of fluctuating right now, but motorsports is still a thing. So let's hope that your career keeps going in the path it's going. You've got a great team with you, Ryder Engineering. I hope to get over there next time I get into Germany. I think I'm going to be back there in about October, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll make a trip.
We have a race in mid-October. It'll be the last race of the season at Nürburgring. Unfortunately, not on the full Nordschleife. It'll just be the Grand Prix circuit. But if you're over there, then I'd love you to come to the race.
Yeah, I would definitely come. I haven't been.
You must come. You must come.
I haven't been there since '98.
Well, I still haven't driven the Nordschleife, so if you were to come, maybe we should stay a day or two after the race, and we can have some fun around the Nordschleife.
Okay.
Slowly. No, don't worry. We won't take any undue risks.
Well, we can rent an R35 GTR because everybody tells me the car drives itself.
Oh yeah, that sounds good. That sounds great.
And we'll take out the insurance.
Yes, absolutely.
The last time I was there, I was riding in a BMW saloon, a 5 Series saloon, and it was my first time on the track, riding shotgun. And I see all these people coming on the lawns, on the curves, and I said, "Oh, this is so great! They come out to cheer for you." He goes, "No, they're waiting for you to crash." That was not very reassuring.
Reassuring, no, I can imagine.
Oh, we made it. But motorsports is a thing, a real big thing that so many Americans love, but so many Americans don't even know enough about it to name any drivers in any series except maybe Formula One, and that's sad. It's sad.
Well, I think the sports in America are so sort of diverse. From the Americans I met, some will know so much about football but nothing about baseball, or so much, they're NASCAR nuts, but they don't care for football or hockey or anything like that. So you sort of seems to be your fans are sort of quite selective on their chosen sport and quite loyal to that chosen sport. So I was just saying from what I've experienced chatting to Americans when I've been over there.
I think that's true, partially, at least partially true. One of the things I heard from a mentor of mine, he says the reason that people don't watch rally racing is because they can't see the whole event from one seat. If you take a look at all of our successful sporting events, you can see the whole event from one seat.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Hockey, basketball, football, baseball, soccer, tennis, all from one seat. Rally, nope, you can't do it.
No, unless they have live stream of the onboard footage, which is quite scary. And I thought that about going to a rally race. It'd be interesting to go once, but all you get is a drive by every now and again, and that's all you see.
So that's another reason rally has not taken off in this country like it should be, because rally racing is some of my favorite. You remember the Group B cars back in the 1970s, the Audi Quattros?
Oh yeah.
Oh God, I love those things. Love those cars.
Iconic car, wasn't it?
And the problem with you're coming back into it, and now you're into cars, and your knowledge base is getting bigger and bigger every day. And then you're going to start finding yourself wanting these things,
Yeah.
and then wanting to be around them. And then before you know it, it's like an alcoholic. You take a couple sips of a beer. Next week, you're drinking a whole Jack Daniel's bottle by yourself.
Yeah. Alcohol. Motorsport can be very addictive.
It is.
Yeah. They say the best way to make a fortune out of motorsport is start with a large fortune.
Right. You used to say that, Jojo. You know how to become a millionaire in racing? Start off as a billionaire.
Exactly.
Well, Freddie, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for taking time out of your day. Your birthday was yesterday. So
it was, No.
Yes.
Sorry we didn't connect yesterday.
No worries.
It was due to the rain, actually. It was raining all day long, and I had a bunch of outside jobs to do on the farm. And
so you're like Jeremy Clarkson. You gave up cars for a while, and you're farming.
Well, I'm not on a commercial scale. It's only for animals for myself, to feed myself. So I've got pigs, sheep, chicken, vegetable patch, and a polytunnel. But it all takes maintenance,
I'm not getting up at 4:00 in the morning to milk a cow. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, me neither. No, I wouldn't do that either.
I get my milk as God intended at the grocery store.
Me too at the moment. Me too.
Yeah. Well, Freddie, good talking to you. Thanks for coming on. We'll stay in touch, and we'll talk about those other things shortly. Have a good birthday week. We'll connect next week.
Lovely. No, thanks for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
All right, anytime. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.